Blaze Bernstein was a kid that had a lot going on. Described as a generous and gentle person with a brilliant mind and a sharp sense of humor, Blaze was on his way to having everything he ever wanted in this world. That was before the promising teen suddenly disappeared, never to be seen alive again. Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for joining today. And I've noticed quite a few new listeners have reached out to let me know that they are listening and have requested that I cover certain stories. And first of all, I'm super pumped that you're here. I'm glad that so many new people are listening to the show. It makes me want to do more and more and more for the show. The more it grows, the more excited about it I get. And I've been doing it for several years now, and I can say that I'm just as excited about it now as I was when I first started the podcast. So I really appreciate all of you listening. But by the way, whether you are a new listener or have been with me for the years that I've been doing this, you can pretty easily reach me if you want to. But the way that you do that has slightly changed. Obviously, you can still DM me on social media, but the email address has changed. The old one still works and I'll still get those messages, but the new email address is joe@10minutemurder.com. Use the number 10 and don't spell it out. joe@10minutemurder.com. Also, there's another slight change, but it's to make it easier to find the places to connect with the podcast, where to listen, where to get merchandise, that kind of thing. You can just go to 10minutemurder.com now. I thought that might be easier than pointing you in a bunch of different directions, depending on what you need. 10minutemurder.com. All right, before we get going with the episode, I need to remind you that anyone mentioned in these episodes is presumed innocent unless convicted in a court of law, which will apply to the story today. Okay, now let's get to it. Born on April 27, 1998 in South Orange County, California, Blaze was the son of Gideon Bernstein and Jean Pepper, who named him after the 17th century French polymath Blaise Pascal. And Pascal was no less than a physicist, mathematician, inventor, writer, and theologian, and it really seemed like Blaze was following the footsteps of his namesake, in his own way. After graduating from Orange County School of the Arts, Blaze studied at the University of Pennsylvania, focusing on subjects like biochemistry, psychology, and poetry, in addition to community activism and food writing. Blaze definitely was not somebody who just went through life, but he lived it to the fullest and absorbed every experience. At the time he was 19 years old, Blaze was already an incredible writer, a gourmet chef, and considering a career in medicine. He was a little shy, but always friendly. He had a deep desire to help others, but unfortunately, Blaze never got a chance to do that. During the winter break of 2017, Blaze returned home to Southern California. It was a much-anticipated visit. The Bernsteins were a close-knit family, so nothing could have been better than spending the holidays all together. New Year's Eve came and went with everybody having a great time. It wasn't until January 3rd, 2018, that Blaze's parents noticed that something was really wrong. That day, Blaze was supposed to meet up with his mom for a dentist appointment, but he failed to show, and he didn't answer his phone. That alone was worrying enough, considering how responsible he ordinarily was. But when Jean called her husband, they compared notes and realized that they're not sure that Blaze even returned home the night before, and full-on panic set in. The Bernsteins rushed back home and found Blaze's room empty, except for his wallet, keys, retainers, and glasses. Basically, he had left behind all of his belongings. But if Blaze never meant to go far the night before, where was he now? Due to the fact that their son had never disappeared like this before, the Bernsteins immediately reported him missing to the police and began to try to log into his social media accounts. Eventually, with the help of some family and friends, Jean and Gideon got access to their son's Snapchat account. It was then that they discovered that Blaze had sent his home address to someone the night before. That someone was a former classmate named Sam Woodward. While the Bernsteins had never heard Sam's name before, Blaze's friends were familiar, and they were terrified to find out that he was the one that he was talking to right before going missing. Sam Woodward was a 20-year-old college dropout, which of course doesn't make him a bad person, but he also had a reputation of being, quote, crazy, homophobic, and racist. Put that together with the fact that Blaze Bernstein was both openly gay and Jewish, it didn't exactly make the situation look promising. However, to everyone's surprise, Sam was pretty cooperative when the Orange County officers showed up at his door. He admitted that he had picked up Blaze on the night of January 2nd, and they had gone to a park in Foothill Ranch to hang out. But here's when Sam's story gets a little bit weird. According to him, at some point, Blaze simply walked down a path alone and disappeared into the bushes. Apparently, Sam then returned home thinking nothing of it. Curiously, Sam added that Blaze had complained about his grades in school and, quote, seemed depressed, but never said anything about wanting to hurt himself.
Department, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered, but now we know a little bit more about that night. Nervous, breathing heavy, and talking fast. That's how investigators describe an interview with the last person to reportedly see 19-year-old Blaze Bernstein alive. The account is in a now sealed search warrant filed by an Orange County Sheriff's investigator and obtained by the Orange County Register. In the affidavit, the friend says he picked Blaze up after making plans over Snapchat on the night of January 2nd. He says Blaze seemed depressed but never said anything about wanting to hurt himself. They drove to Borrego Park, where he says Blaze walked into the darkness alone.
No wallet, no money, no identification, no credit cards, no keys, no eyeglasses.
His parents speaking about his disappearance before his body was found Tuesday. Investigators believe Blaze was murdered that first night. During one interview, they noticed scratches and abrasions on the friend's hand. He said it was from a fight club. They also noticed dirt under his nails, he says, from falling into a puddle.
We have interviewed that friend several times. That person is not in custody.
The affidavit says the friend's story stayed fairly consistent. They did notice after one interview, he pulled his jacket over his hands to prevent his hands and fingers from touching any part of the doors he touched. The Sheriff's Department did not comment on the search warrant. As the search for Blaze's killer continues, hundreds held candles and shared memories of him at a vigil last night, his family heartbroken by his death.
Our family is devastated by the news, and we, like so many of you around the world, love Blaze. And we wanted nothing more than to seek his safe return.
We are told investigators continue to follow leads and are working around the clock.
Over the next week, Orange County Sheriff's Department officials and volunteers searched the park, finding no signs of Blaze. As the days passed, the hope of finding the possibly injured teen alive was fading away. Eventually, the Bernsteins were sure that they would never know what happened to their son. Not knowing where else to search, detectives decided to give the park one more look on January 9th. It was on that rainy day that they finally discovered the body of Blaze Bernstein under a large tree branch and a mound of dirt. According to the autopsy report, Blaze had been stabbed 19 times in the neck and had defensive wounds on his right palm and several fingers. This had hardly been a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing. Someone had enough hatred in them to strike a defenseless person repeatedly with a knife in a murderous rage. As you are probably imagining the next thing to happen, Sam Woodward was arrested 3 days later on January 12th and charged with the murder of Blaze Bernstein. During the investigation, the police uncovered racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic content on Sam's cell phone and linked him to a neo-Nazi organization called Atomwaffen Division. As a result, 2 charges of committing a hate crime were added to the list, to which Sam pleaded not guilty, as he did to the murder charge. It seems that Sam's defense is going to use his mental state as an argument in his trial. According to his lawyer, Edward Munoz, Sam suffers from Asperger's syndrome and has issues with sexual identity. In his initial statement, Sam claims that Blaze tried to kiss him while they were sitting in the parked car, after which he pushed the teenager away and watched him exit the car and walk alone into the park. Sam said that after the incident, he drove to his girlfriend's house, but interestingly, he could not tell the detectives the woman's name or even where she lived. Maybe a far more likely scenario is that even if Blaze really tried to kiss an old classmate, Sam may have followed him into the park and stabbed him to death. Or another possibility, killing Blaze was Sam's plan from the very beginning. Due to the COVID crisis, the trial has been postponed several times, followed by an Orange County judge temporarily suspending criminal proceedings altogether in July of 2022 due to concerns about Sam Woodward's mental competence. So for now, Blaze Bernstein's murder case is at a standstill, and only time will tell if the truth about what happened to him will ever be revealed and justice served. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Now keep in mind, I mentioned Sam Woodward's name as the possible most likely suspect in this case. He has not been convicted or even stood trial at this point, so we can't say that he is guilty of this crime, but he will have his day in court eventually. Thank you for listening, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you are a new listener to 10-Minute Murder, welcome. Super happy to have you. Make sure you subscribe before you go. Wherever you're listening right now, find the place where you subscribe, hit that button, and that ensures that you won't have to go on a wild goose chase every time you're trying to listen to 10-Minute Murder. It'll always be right there and available for you to listen every time you open the app. So subscribe where you're listening right now. Connect on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find the links for that in the show notes of this episode. Go to 10minutemurder.com. Links for that are there as well. Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Be safe and make good choices.